Hello again Internet, Astro with Roro here, and welcome back to my channel on what is a very cold night. So I'm in a rather dark location tonight, not too far from where I live, but it took me a little bit to get here, and it might not look it because I have my car headlights here illuminating me so that you can see me. But we're quite high above sea level, as high as I can get at least in, where I live without driving too far. But we're here for a special reason, because in about 2 hours, Saturn is going to seem like it's going to disappear behind the moon. And then about 45 minutes later, it's going to magically reappear from the dark side of the moon. So we're going to watch and see the optical illusion of a planet disappearing behind our moon. Now I'm going to get set up here. I'll talk you through what my rig is, how I knew this was going to happen, how I planned and found an awesome place to view this, and way over in the distance there you can see a huge amount of light pollution from the nearby city. But I'll talk you through all how to do it. I'll show you how I do it, including talking about editing later on as well. So hang around and I hope you enjoy. Alright, welcome back, and finally got set up. There's always difficulties in setting up, especially in a new place and when you haven't used a rig in a certain way for a long time, but you can possibly just see the moon is just rising. So we've got about 10 minutes before Saturn actually starts to occult the moon, and oh my god, what a view. Spectacular. But to quickly go over the setup that we have today, I've got the Skywatcher Maxitov Newtonian here. It's the 190mm aperture, so 1000mm focal length, normally about f5. But I've got a 2x Barlow on here, and I'm using the ZWO ASI 294 MC Pro because I want to shoot in color, I want to get it all done in one color, I don't have to deal with filters and stuff tonight. And then the mount that I've got it on is my super portable Rainbow Astro RST135E. The encoder definitely helps at times like this because it just keeps it really nice and on the target. And then I've got my super mount carbon fiber tripod here because, as you can see, there is a little bit of breeze about, and this thing is a bit of a sail, so definitely need to keep everything grounded. And then I'm running it off a little Melee computer at the moment with an external hard drive attached to make sure I don't run out of space. So, wow, what a view. All right, I'm going to finish getting ready, get everything finally set up, do a final check on my focus. I've been letting this telescope try and cool down for a while and acclimatize because it's about 3 degrees Celsius right now with the breeze, so only just above freezing. And I really didn't want all the heat and currents and stuff in here causing issues because I'm going to have to shoot really low on the horizon as it is. And because of that, I wanted to just make sure that there was as little issues as possible. So hopefully it's fully cooled down now. I can do a final tweak of the focus, get it just right, and I'm just addicted to that view. That moon is just phenomenal. Wow. I'm actually able to see a little bit below the regular horizon here because I'm over 1,000 meters above sea level, about like 12 or 1,300 meters above sea level. So it's at like 4 and a bit thousand feet or something like that. So it's definitely going to help because I'm going to have to shoot really low. I think it's going to be about 5 degrees above when Saturn initially hits, and then it'll be coming back maybe around like the 15-degree mark or something like that. Anyway, enough talking. I'm going to get on with the show. All right, well, we've got her all framed up. You can see the moon here. We're actually doing a bit of recording now already, and it's looking really nice. That framing is just spectacular, I gotta say. The setup here is really, really doing some nice work, but we're gonna see Saturn appear right up in the top of this corner, right up in the top of the screen here, pretty damn soon, so excited to see that. All right, well, we have had first contact. Saturn is now hiding behind the moon, so shh, we have to be very quiet at the moment, because if we're not careful, we might spook it, and he may never come back. You know, he's hiding, and maybe he'll like it if we can't see him. I don't know, so just gotta be very careful, slow with our movements, and then, if we're very, very lucky, in about 20 minutes, Saturn's going to reappear. Interestingly enough, actually going to reappear from the dark side of the moon. Well, it's not really the dark side of the moon. The shadow side of the moon, I should say. So It's going to be a little bit more difficult to pinpoint exactly where it's going to come back out, since when I look through the camera and the telescope, you have that real Terminator line, and then there's just nothing. It's so dark. So I'm going to have to do a bit of prediction to try and work out exactly where Saturn's going to reappear, but fingers crossed it's going to be good, because I do have to admit, although the view looked great with my eyes and generally through the screen, when I went back and did a bit of pixel peeping, there is a huge amount of seeing and transparency issues because the moon was just so low in the sky. Like, it really didn't look very good. So I don't know if I'll be able to get any details at Saturn at all. Kind of just looked like a bit of a blob. Maybe in editing we'll be able to get some details back out. But hopefully now that, the moon's nice and high, or at least higher, we might be able to get a little bit of detail of Saturn, hopefully some of the moons as well. Fingers crossed. But we'll see how we go. But for now, I need to get back into the car. The temperature keeps dropping. It's actually below zero now, which is really, really not expected for up here. Wasn't meant to get this low. And there's definitely a bit of a breeze. So we're looking at about like -5, -6 with wind chill, and my hands are cold. I did not bring gloves. Silly me. All right, and jump back into the car, and then we'll come back, hopefully when Saturn's right about to appear, and we'll hopefully be able to capture her coming back out of the shadow of the moon. Okay, well, just waiting for the final minutes now. Got about a minute and a half left until Saturn should start to reappear. And honestly, the hardest thing so far has been the dynamic range. The moon is so bright. And if I angle too far away from the moon, getting reflections through the telescope. So that's being the hardest thing at the moment. So I don't know if I'll be able to expose enough to get Saturn. But we'll see. I have to just see. Got about a minute until some of the moons start coming through. So hopefully I'll be able to tell then if I've got my exposure and location right. But fingers crossed. Whoa! She's cold. Crank the exposure a bit and see if you can see anything in the shadow. So this is where we currently are. We should be able to see Hyperion about to peer out, and then very shortly Saturn will reappear as well. But so far, I can't see anything. See if I crank the gain as well. Nothing yet. Okay, apparently Saturn. Oh, I can see! I can see! Yes, I can see her! Oh! She is just starting to reappear. Oh, and I can make out a ring! Oh, it's still wobbly. The atmosphere is still not great. But I can see her. Yes! Yes, she's reappearing. Oh, yes! Come on. There she is. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Alright. How to not quite overexpose it. There we go. Oh. Yes. Oh. Alright. Let me grab you and bring you over here. Okay. I'm gonna do this real time. Here we go. Here we have the moon, well overexposed, and here's Saturn. So I'm going to go to 100% scale, and you can see the quality is really not great there, wobbling all over the place. But just came back out from the shadow here, and there we are, Saturn reappearing from the moon. Alright, I'm gonna keep taking some more videos. Gonna keep taking some more videos, see if I can stack them. Pray that we got some frames of still atmosphere in there, and also that I can feel my fingers again soon. I'm gonna get back to you when I'm back in the car. I'll see you in a bit. Alright, well, I'm done. I'm done up here. That's it. It's my laptop's died because of the battery. My mic has died because of the battery. It's too cold, and everything is just falling apart now. So I've got what I've got. I'm gonna have to deal with it. I think I managed to get some stuff. I was trying to get a little bit more of Saturn to try and get some moons. Laptop literally shut down halfway through the recording. Who knows if it actually saved anything or if it's just corrupted, but I think it's time for me to just pack up, go home, and we'll come back to this tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to look through what I managed to get, how badly, find out how badly I managed to mess everything up. But most importantly, we're also going to talk about exactly how you can plan to be at the right place at the right time, and hopefully you can bring some better skills to get some better images out of it. But all of that will be coming tomorrow. Well, for you it'll be like now. We are back in the studio, and it's definitely the next day, not 2 or 3 weeks later. But all of that aside, let's talk about how I knew that Saturn was going to be occulted by the moon at that place and at that time, and how you can also figure out the same things for your location and occultations that might be happening near you. Now, I'm going to take us through 2 ways of finding about occultations. The first is going to be using a website, so I've got my laptop here, doing a bit of a screen recording so that you can follow along. So it should appear up here soon. And the website I'm going to be using for this is called inthesky.org, and there's hyphens between all that. I'll put a link to it down in the description below, but it's in-the-sky.org. Now, In the Sky is a great piece of software. It has a huge amount of astro news, and it's also got like planetariums and stuff, and we're going to be using some of its search functionality today to find occultations that are occurring near you. So what you want to first do is up in the nav, go to Objects, then Object Search, and this will take us to In the Sky's search functionality here. And what you want to do is change from Objects to News, then change the feed all the way down to Lunar Occultations. Now we want to make sure they're oldest first, because that's going to give us the ones that are upcoming first. And you can see the dates here that it will show us, so you can change that start date and end date. And if you want to include unobservable events, these might be events that happen, below your horizon, but maybe you're willing to travel for them, you can use that, or you can change it here. Now, I do also want to say that you need to make sure you've set your location correctly. I'm not going to bother for this demonstration, but you can click this change location. It'll take you to a map where you can sort of drop a pin of your location, and it will then use those coordinates of your lat and long to determine if events are observable for you or not. So once you've done that, make sure that your start date and end date are something reasonable. I'm just going to leave them at the default here, and you can click search. This will now show all of the occultations where the moon goes in front of an object from that location that is mentioned. And if we scroll down here, we can see that, yeah, there was another occultation on the 21st of August. And if we click on that, then it gives us some information about it, when it is. It happened apparently 7 days ago. And if we scroll down, we can see, oh yeah, it was over, South America and a little bit of through Africa and Europe. Now, if I make this a little bit bigger here, we can see this map here shows the area for which it was visible. And we can see the start and the end of it for all of these locations. So anything in the middle here, we'll be able to see both the start and the end. These sections here will be able to see the start or the end. So it's whether it's partial or whole. Now here we can see the motion of the moon's shadow across the Earth, because really an occultation is just like a total solar eclipse, but instead of it eclipsing the sun or occulting the sun, it occults another object like a star or a planet. And because that object isn't as bright as the sun, we don't get the dramatic effects of a total solar eclipse. But really an occultation is just the covering of an object. And we can see here that the path that the moon's shadow makes across the Earth, that's where it will be visible from. And then it gives you all of the breakouts of the time in UTC from the start and the end for each of the sort of locations, the major locations that the occultation occurs in. So you can use that to determine where it will be visible in your area. You can also use this little sort of planetarium here to scroll around and sort of see that. And you can sort of zoom in, zoom out. Now, once you know the date and the time, I would personally move over to a piece of software like Stellarium, which is a full-blown planetarium which you can download on your computer. Plug in that date and time into Stellarium, and then you can actually look exactly at minute by minute what it's going to look like, whereabouts in the sky it is, change your location slightly if you might need to travel for it like I did, and ensure that the timing that you have is the correct timing for the location you will be, not necessarily where your home is. But I think that's something that most people will know what to do. Stellarium is a very well used piece of software, and there's some great tutorials out there for people who know a lot more about it than me. So I'm now going to jump onto the second way of doing it, which is using a phone app. Now, if you prefer to use a smartphone instead of a laptop or a desktop computer, there are some great planetarium pieces of software that you can get as apps. The one I love most is SkyGuide. It's been around for quite a while. It, I think, just has the most beautiful UI. It's super slick and smooth and gives a lot of really great information. But there's plenty of other ones there, including Stellarium that I mentioned earlier, also has an app that you can download. So I'm sure a lot of them have similar sort of functionality. One of the things I love about SkyGuide is it has this calendar icon down the bottom here. And if we tap that, it will show you information about tonight for where you are, and obviously it uses the geolocation of your device, or you can set a custom location, as well as sort of upcoming events that are sort of occurring. So you can say, oh, Saturn's coming up to opposition. Great time to go and view Saturn. So if we go a little bit further, we can actually see not only is there a partial lunar eclipse that's coming up, but there's also another occultation coming up with the moon occult Saturn on the 17th of September from where I am. And if we tap on that, it gives us a little bit of information, where it starts, where it ends, all of that. And we can tap this handy view icon here. And if we do that, it will change the date and the time to when that occultation starts, as well as sort of zooming in to the area, which I just love. It's so easy. Now we zoom in on the moon here and we can see that Saturn is right here behind the moon. So this is like peak occultation, the middle of it. But we can then go a little bit forward and a little bit back and see exactly how, as the moon crosses the sky at a different rate to the background stars, that the occultation occurs. Similarly, if we actually tap on the moon, we can watch the sky move and keep the moon still, which, whichever way you'd like to look at it, it's the same thing. Just depends on your point of reference. Now, more importantly, I think, is you now know exactly when it is going to occur. Now, we can also zoom out here and see where in the sky it's going to occur, because you might not have a complete sky view from home, or you might be looking at an event that requires a dark sky or a specific item to occur in a specific location. And we can see this is in the east. So the moon and Saturn are going to be rising during it. So what we want to do is actually go to the earliest point in time. So before Saturn is occulted, and we can see it's actually at sunset. You can see the sky is sort of a little bit lighter here. It looks like, yeah, the sun has just set, but we're still in that sort of twilight zone. And what I love to do here is you can see the observing properties of each of the objects. So if we tap on Saturn and tap again, we can come down here and see that down at the bottom we have this altitude and azimuth. We also have the RA index, which is very helpful for just finding it using an automated telescope, a GOTO or something like that. But we can see we're about 11.5 degrees above the horizon. So that's going to be pretty low, and that's going to cause a lot of seeing issues. Now, this is very similar to what I had to deal with. Mine was even lower than this. I think I started about 3 degrees above the horizon. But really what you want to do when you're shooting something like this is shoot it as close to the zenith, or 90 degrees straight overhead, as possible. When you're imaging straight overhead, you look through the least amount of atmosphere, which is going to give you the clearest image. When you're shooting really low on the horizon, you have to look through a huge amount of atmosphere before you escape sort of that sort of curvature of the Earth, right? Sorry, flat earthers, yes. And that means that there's a huge amount of atmosphere that light gets disturbed by, which really degrades the view that you're going to be able to see. So for this occultation, you would also want to then find a point near you that's really high above sea level. The higher you are above sea level, the less atmosphere you have to look through. So you're gonna just sort of decrease the amount of seeing issues that you will have. Now, then what we can do is also we can sort of fast forward to when the occultation ends and look again, and we can see by this time it's up around that sort of 44 degree mark. So the seeing will be a lot better, but you still want to be as high as possible irrespective. So now that we know that we need a sort of clear view from the low east up to sort of that sort of 1/4 sort of point in the sky, we can start to plan where we need to be to get the best chance of seeing this occultation. So now we know what's happening, when it's happening, where in the sky it's happening. Let's work out where we can be to get the best viewing point. Okay, well, I'm back on my laptop using Google Maps, and yes, that's because I'm a bit of a boomer and I prefer using Google Maps rather than on a laptop rather than on my phone. You can use it however you like. Now, there's a few different ways you can go about finding a good location. I find the easiest is to use Google Maps. I just think it is really powerful. You could use Google Earth as well. You could use another piece of software. But what I like to do is now I need to narrow down where I'm going to be looking. So I know that I need a view in the east, and I also want to be as high as possible. So that really narrows it down quite a bit. With this sort of event, I don't really need to worry about light pollution as much. I'm not trying to image something that's very faint. Saturn's just about at its closest point to Earth. The moon is obviously also quite bright, so I don't really have to worry about that too much. But saying all of that, I still don't want to get a lot of particulate matter in the sky because that will have an impact on the quality of the seeing that I have. So since I'm in Sydney, I've sort of centered Google Maps around the Sydney area, and I know that there are a number of mountain ranges near Sydney that I can use to my advantage to get that elevation. Now, there is some mountainous ranges up on the sort of coast here, up towards the central coast. There's a mountain range. There's the Blue Mountains, which is a very large mountain range. And there's also some mountain ranges down here in the sort of south of Sydney. I know the ones down the south of Sydney only look east. There's sort of a low shelf, then it really kicks up with some cliffs, and then it sort of flat and plateaus out. The Blue Mountains, you can look east or west from them, and the ones up in the central coast, you can look east or west too. Now, I'm gonna put my search around the Blue Mountains area. It's an area I know quite well. I actually already know quite a few locations there that would work great for this, but as part of this tutorial, I'm just gonna pretend that I don't really know any locations, and I've just seen some mountains and thought, that looks good. So what you kind of want to do is you want to sort of zoom into the area a little bit, but you also want to change how the map looks. We have some layers down here, and we want to change it to the terrain layer. So make sure you are on the terrain layer. You can see there's quite a few. You can open up quite a bit more here. And this is going to give you a view of that elevation. So if I didn't know there was a mountain range out here, well, it's pretty obvious from this elevation view that there's some mountainous regions over here, and I should be able to find a spot where I'm able to see. So we can see it's quite flat, and then we really start to hit some of these hills over here. Now, what you kind of want to look for is you want to look for something that's flat and then, rises quite steeply. So it looks like there's some of that around here, and in fact, there's some lookouts. You can see there's this Hawkesbury lookout here, which is right next to a road. That's fantastic. And what we want to do is we want to zoom to a point where we still get the topographic line. So there we go. Okay, perfect. This is the perfect amount of zoom. Each of these lines here is 25 meters. I think, wait. 20 meters, sorry, 20 meters of elevation. So 60 feet. I'm sure if you're in the US or somebody that uses imperial measurements, it would automatically show you this in feet. For me, this is a 20-meter elevation, 60 feet sort of equivalent. And we can see this is the height above sea level. So 100 meters or 300 feet above sea level, 200, etc. And what we can see here is we have quite a low level, you know, it's that sort of 60, 40 sort of meters, and then it rises quite quickly to this lookout here. So what we would expect is if we looked at this lookout, we'd get a really nice open view to the east, because the east is on the right of this map. And yes, absolutely, that view is perfect, really. That's a really good view. If we then go to, instead of a static view, what I'd then like to do is drop the little street view guy somewhere around here and have a 3D look around, you know. So if we then come up here to where the actual lookout is, we can then make sure as we point to the east by using the little compass down here that we actually have, you know, a view where we want to be looking. So if I sort of look here, make sure we're looking to the east, and if I was up here a little bit more, I'd get a bit more of a view. But yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. You know, the moon will be rising sort of here and coming up this way, and if I move a little bit further forward, that tree won't be in the way at all. So that would be fine. Now the problem here is that's only about 200, you know, 220 meters above sea level. It's not very far. We want to get somewhere much higher. Ideally, you know, you want to get as high as possible. Where I was doing my imaging from, I was about 1,000 meters above sea level, and that was further into the Blue Mountains here. It continues to climb and climb and climb. But I used the exact same process to find that. Now, the other thing that you can do is once you've found a location like this, you are able to use something like photo pills to get a bit of an overlay of the two. Or if you don't want to use something like photo pills, you can sort of do it manually. If I sort of zoom a little bit further in here and just bring that 3D view back a little bit, if I can get maybe a little bit closer over here, see if one of these is, yeah, this is a good one. Okay, so now we're sort of in front of those trees, and a little look up this way, and then you can just sort of generally line up what you have on your phone with the view in the app and say, okay, where's east? It's just sort of there. All right, well, east in my phone is here, and yeah, I can sort of generally see that that's gonna work. You don't need to be super precise with this, and obviously the more open your sky view is, the less precise you have to be in general. But that's how I find out where I'm gonna be. I also do use photo pills, and actually do a really nice AR overlay, but sometimes that's just not necessary. So now I know that if I drove to this location, I would get a view, it would be visible, I'd get that sort of nice down to the horizon look, because obviously you need that when you're shooting, quite low just to have the visibility there. The other thing is, as you get higher in your elevation, you can actually see past the regular horizon. You sort of increase the length. If you think of like a right angle triangle, as you get higher, the longest edge of that triangle gets longer. Oh, sorry, the longest edge does get longer as you get higher, so that you're able to sort of see further into the distance there. So that would mean that you can actually see below the horizon, and you know, when you're at that really high elevation, you can see sort of below the horizon. That allows, above. When you get to those really high elevations, you can see below the traditional horizon if you were just in a complete sort of flat viewing point. And that means that you can see events that maybe you couldn't otherwise see, or maybe see more of them. If you were only able to see a partial occultation or eclipse, for example, you might be able to get another couple of minutes or degrees of time on that. So that is how I know when events are coming up, know when they're coming up, find where they are, and then confirm that I'm going to be able to see them. Now, one final thing before we finish this, and that is, once you've found your location that you're able to view from, you really need to recheck on your planetarium software, whether it be your phone or, you know, Stellarium on your laptop or something like that, that you are still in the path of that event. making adjustments to your location will change when and where in the sky that will occur. And sometimes if you're at the very edge of an occultation, you might move just outside of it. So you might also have to restrict your search for locations in the direction of that occultation. So just reconfirm that where you're going to view it from can also see it if you're moving away from your home. If you're doing something like a solar eclipse, then moving a couple of kilometers can actually change a couple of seconds off the eclipse, which is going to be super important if you're trying to get things like Bailey's beads, for example. So make sure you triple check all of your timings and everything after you've found a location that you think will work. So now that you have found your event, you've photographed it or videoed it, you have all of that data in your back home, it's time to edit it. So how did I do the editing for my occultation? Well, let's jump into it now. Okay, so I'm going to preface all of this with the fact that I am not a fantastic planetary or lunar editor, processor. There are people out there who are far better at me than this, and they've made some great video tutorials on how to do it. So I'd highly recommend that you go and dive deeper into it using some of their videos rather than the ones that I'm using here. And due to that, I'm going to keep this reasonably top line of what I do. But there's three main parts that I do as part of it. Firstly, I start using AutoStack at 4, fantastic piece of software, and this does all of the lucky imaging adjustments, right? So it looks through an entire video that you might have taken or a bunch of stills, works out the best pixels to use from each of those and combines that into a master stacked image. Then I go into Registacks and I use Registacks to do my wavelet manipulation to try and bring out some more detail from each of those. And then finally, I combine everything in Photoshop for these kinds of pieces of work. Now I use PixInsights for my deep space workflow, but I do use Photoshop still for my planetary and lunar workflow. So let's get started here. And you can see I'm using AutoStack at 4. And what we want to first do is we want to open up one of or multiple of the videos that I sort of created. So here we are, you can see sort of Moon, Saturn, and we can sort of click on one or a couple of these and open that piece up. Now you can select multiple of these, but I'm just going to choose one here. We'll close the browser. And that's all fine. Now, the next thing is you want to make sure that your video is aligned correctly within your viewport. So you can hold Shift and click and drag the mouse around here. And that will allow you to remove or manipulate the video frame that you can see here within my window. And this is very important. Now you can see I'm adjusting the width and the height up the top of the image size of the canvas of AutoStack it. And now what we want to do, once we sort of have the whole video frame centered, we want to actually get Saturn and move it over this tiny little dot in the middle. That's the center point of the canvas within AutoStack it. So again, Shift, click, and move Saturn a little closer, and there we go. And now this is so that we can actually minimize the size of the canvas. You can see I'm dragging down the width and the height there. Because why process a whole video if we only have to process a small part of it? So now what we can do, you can see I'm dragging the timeline across the top there, because I want to make sure that during the whole sequence, if there's a lot of movement, then you want to actually make sure that Saturn stays within the viewport the whole time. If it's shaking all around a lot, then you might need to increase your video or your canvas size to always capture that. Now, next step is you want to place your AP grid, which is your alignment points. This is what AutoStack it uses to work out how to align the frame or the subparts of the frame. So I just click place AP grid there, make some nice little alignment points. Next up, you want to make sure that you're using local AP in the quality estimator. Make sure it's set to planetary on the right, and then click Analyze. This will go through, look at all of that, work out what frames are good, what frames are bad. Then you want to say double stack reference, and I do automatic. There I don't do manual, but that just means it looks at the reference frame twice and make sure that it's like the correct one and all that sort of stuff. Next up, I use 30 and 10% as my sort of amount of frames that I use. So 10%, I make one stack with 10% of frames, one stack with 30% of frames. I do change this around a little bit depending how high or low quality the frames are. If you have a lot of really bad frames and just a couple of frames, you want to make sure you exclude all those bad frames. Don't include them. That will just make it look worse. So you want a smaller number. If you have a lot of really great frames, well, you can use a higher percentage because you won't be degrading them by taking sort of a larger number. But you can sort of adjust it, and you can have multiple, and it will create sets of each of those. Next up, you want to make sure you're using the right number of threads for your CPU. Here you can see I'm using 30 out of 32. I find when I'm doing a lot of my AutoStack at 4, I want to leave 1 or 2 threads available. These are like the virtualized parts of your CPU. So I have a 16-core CPU with hyper-threading, or whatever it's called nowadays. Then that's 32 like threads rather than logical core processors. And if I leave 1 or 2 of them available, I can still use my computer for other stuff. So I do sacrifice a little bit of time, but it means I can watch YouTube or something if I want in the background. But if you want to get it done as quick as possible, make sure your threads are the maximum. So it would be 32 out of 32, for example, here. Next up, you can also, as you can see here, use detect. This is a cool piece of software that looks at all of your planetary videos and determines whether there's been an impact and sends it off to sort of for that. And this is great because it helps science as a whole to work out how many times do planets in our solar system, or surfaces of the moon and all of that sort of stuff, get impacted by objects moving around, so like comets and asteroids and all of that kind of fun stuff. So I leave that on, highly recommend it, and then you can send off an email about that, and you get your name put up on a little leaderboard, which is very cool. Finally, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your normalization is ticked, RGB align, I leave ticked, and then I don't sharpen here. I do sharpening in AutoStack in Registack 6, but if you want, you can try sharpening here. And then finally, choose your super resolution. In this case, drizzling, I usually go about 1.5 times, but you can go up to 3 times. Now, next step is to stack your images here, your videos here. I won't do it in this video. Stacking can take a while depending how many frames you have. But needless to say, click the button, put on another video. Maybe you're watching me while you're doing it right now. Go make yourself a coffee or something like that, or a tea, and come back once it's done. All right, now next step is Registacks. This is Registacks version 6. And to get started, what you want to do is you want to import the image that you saved out of AutoStack into Registack so that you can adjust the wavelets of it. So you go up to select at the top, and that will open up this dialog here. And from there, what you can do is, and you can see all of these drizzled, 1.5 times drizzled images of Saturn that I have exported. And I actually separate them out. So I have all of my AutoStack outputs in one folder, and then I have a subfolder in that I call Regi, and that's all my Registacked versions of those same images, so that I can sort of keep them all separated. Now, we're going to pick one of these, and I'm going to quickly show you how I do Registacks. This isn't the same image that I took previously in the video. That was a one-shot color camera. These are going to be using monochromes, but the Saturn I have here is much larger, so it should be easier for you to see the small details that change with all of the compression that goes on over YouTube. So this is a monochrome image that you'll be seeing. Don't worry, don't freak out. It's not the image I actually took. It's just so that you can actually see what's happening, because wavelet manipulation makes a lot of very small changes to an image, and that's gonna be very hard for you to see on YouTube. So this is just me sort of showing that. So this is the image that I've opened here. You can see Saturn, quite nice and large there. And on the left-hand side now, we have our wavelet manipulation. So you wanna make sure up the top left you have wavelets clicked. I do linear adjustments, and I add a couple of layers. The more layers you have, the more times it does the same thing, right? So it's just thinking of like, how many times do you want to multiply your numbers of manipulation. You can also turn on show processing area. This will put some little dots around the image. By default, Registacks doesn't do the whole image manipulation. That can be quite CPU intensive. And you can see here, this is the little bounding box. And so it'll only show you the changes within this bounding box. Then you want to click the do all once you're completed to actually manipulate it. So you can see I'm changing some of my wavelet layers, and hopefully via YouTube, you can see that is definitely making some adjustments, sort of crispening it up a bit. And if you tap and click on this little button, what you can see is you can see where in the image these wavelets are being manipulated. And as we go to the different layers, you can see they become smaller and smaller and more fine-grained. So at the bottom of the layer, this list, you're making large changes to large structures within the image. And if you go to the very top, you'll be making changes to very small structures within the image. And you want to manipulate each of these differently because they will have a different impact on the outcome of your image. You can see here, wow, huge amount of detail, but there's also a lot of noise involved in those adjustments. So you need to be very careful within that. The other thing that's really cool about Registax is you can save your schemes or sort of profiles, right? So once you've got a level that you like with them all, you can save them. And then you can load them and toggle through them. And so I have some presets here that I've done and I use often. And it's really handy if you have a lot of images that you want to go through. Do one or two different ones, like an aggressive one, a light one, and then you can just toggle between them, see which one's best for each image. You then want to click. So then over on the right here, you can see I now have up the denoise. Really good for removing the little noise that you sort of will inevitably bring back with some wavelets. Don't want to be too aggressive with it. I'm going to the max here to show you what it does do so that hopefully you can see it. But you want to take that somewhere where you feel it's doing a good job without also over denoising your image, which will just kill all the small details. One thing I will finally show you which isn't relevant to this image, and that is RGB alignment. So if you do use a one-shot color camera like I was for this, you can use this tool to adjust each of your red, green, and blue layers and shift them by 1 pixel at a time, horizontally or vertically, to make sure they're all lined up nicely. Now, AutoStack, it can also do this for you, but this is a way of manually manipulating it afterwards in case AutoStack it didn't do it right, and you can see that your blue is like slightly shifted off to the right and you need to realign it, which can happen especially when you're shooting low on the horizon. Once you've done all of that, you want to go up to the top left and click Do All. This will add all of the processing you've just done across the entire image rather than just that central zone. And from here we can actually see, yeah, you can actually see some very small little bits of moons around Saturn as well. And then you want to save your image. This will save it out as another TIFF file, and you can then use that in the last part of our processing, which in my case is Photoshop. Now, you won't see this image in that because this was from a previous session where I shot Saturn. I think it was last year actually. Yeah, 2023, this one. But what you will see is the actual Saturns that I captured during that outing a couple of weeks ago. And so let's jump into Photoshop to bring all of these individual images back together. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. I've loaded up my Photoshop file that has all of my separate layers in it. And this is the final image that I produced. But I'm gonna take you through layer by layer how I got to this endpoint because it wasn't all done in one go and there were further processing pieces I needed to do, especially of the moon. Because remember, while we've now done our stacking of Saturn, we haven't done any stacking of the moon, and we also haven't done any wavelets on the moon. So, on the right here you can see all of the layers. I'm gonna go and turn all of those off and start from a blank canvas so that you can see where I begin. So let's turn all those layers off, and now we have a blank canvas. Now the first thing I start off with is a black background. I add a nice black background into it. I actually try and match it to the image, and you can see here I've now shown the first layer of the moon. This is a layer that I did actually put through AutoStack it, so I took all of my videos, including the moon ones, put them all through. This is an AutoStack it TIFF output that hasn't been through Registax yet. I don't want to do Registax yet. I'll do that in a minute. This is one of those images that I brought from the moon into Photoshop. And as we sort of go here, if I turn off the background here, you will see that the background of the moon actually has a bit of black in it. So what I did is I took the color value of that and used that as my black background so that they match nicely. And it just gives me extra space around it. Here I am toggling on some other parts of the moon, which I'll explain in a minute, so that we have a nice black background to sort of work on, so that we don't have all of this splodginess, right? So now we have our base canvas, I will call it, where we have the moon and a nice backdrop to it. Now, you might say, Rowan, why do you have multiple images of the moon? Well, I actually took a mosaic of the moon while I was out there. the magnification and the size of the sensor that I have wasn't big enough to fit all of the moon in it. So I had to take a video of one part of the moon and then shift it, do a video of a different part of the moon, knowing I would combine that back in post. So this is one, you can see the horizontal line going across there. So this is like I'm gonna call it southern half of the moon just because it's the lower section. It's not actually the southern half of the moon, but anyway. And that's sort of there. And then you'll see here I toggle on the northern part of the moon in this view. And you have that beautiful terminator line that now comes all the way down. Now, I have manually aligned these. There was some overlap that you would have seen. So I went and sort of made those alignments and overlapped them. Unfortunately, as you'll see, I missed a spot. The moon does not look like that, in case you were curious. No, the moon is actually a hole, but I missed a spot. And so that's where the edge of the sensor was. Now I've gone and done a bit of blending. I've put a layer mask on and sort of faded out that section a little bit, and then used a bit of the image that you would have seen earlier, which I actually took earlier in the night. So I actually went and took images of the moon. I did a mosaic at the start of the night and a mosaic at the end of the night. Now, why did I do that? Well, I wanted to make sure that I had a backup in case I stuffed everything up, which I did. So I got a mosaic straight away when I knew I had good battery in all of my gear. But unfortunately, early in the night, the moon was very low in the sky. It was right down on the horizon. And that means that it wasn't great seeing. There was a lot of issues with seeing and transparency. But I thought, it's okay, it's just a backup. Then at the end of the night, I took some more videos when the moon was quite a bit higher after the occultation had completed. Actually, I think this was done during the occultation, not afterwards, because everything died shortly after. I'm pretty sure I did it during. Anyway, go back to part one, you'll be able to see when I did it, I would have explained it then. But because the moon was higher in the sky, I got much better transparency and I could get a lot more detail out of it. But backups are good because I missed a spot, and so I'm able to fill in that little corner section there with the original early images that I took. Now, yes, that section of the final image is lower quality because I was looking through more atmosphere, but it's better than not having it at all. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you that difference in detail here. So here I've zoomed into part of the moon. You can see the terminator line on the left there. And I'm going to toggle between the two different images here. And you can see that the more orange image, way less quality, way less detail than the more green image that was taken higher overhead. And it's pretty night and day. And again, this is before registacks or any sort of wavelet manipulation. This is just the auto stack at output. So this is why I wanted to use that other image, but had to use it in a little corner, right? So next step is we start getting into some image manipulation. Now, I don't like the fact that these are two different colors and they're different brightnesses, so we need to make them look the same. I also don't really like the color cast of the moon here. I feel like it looked more gray to my eyes when I was out there rather than this sort of green color. So I'm actually going to go and turn this into a bit of a near monochrome image. Not full monochrome, but I have this little hue adjustment and saturation adjustment, and I've dragged the saturation way down. So that sort of, to me, looks more like what the moon actually looked like once it had risen above the horizon there. Now, I also do a little bit further manipulation on the bad quality image because you'll see there's the little section there and it just doesn't match quite right. So again, I changed the hue and saturation a little bit more. I then increased the brightness of it a little bit to match and change the levels a little bit. And now I think that matches pretty nicely. The quality is not always going to be there, but at least the color and tone matches. So now we have what I think is a pretty good looking moonshot just on its own. Now we need to add Saturn in, right? No, not quite. This image now is my moon image. So I save a TIFF of this out, but unfortunately Registax has a maximum size limit. So I actually had to downscale it a little bit, export that out, do all of my wavelet manipulation now on my whole moon image, and then we re-import that. And here we have what that looks like. So this is the non-Registaxed version of the image, and this is the Registaxed version of it. So wow, look at that detail improvement after we do all of our wavelets. That is awesome. And yes, because I had to downsample it to get it into Registax, I do lose a little bit of detail, but I think what I gain is way better. Now what we do is we go through and we add our Saturns back in. Each of those files, remember they were very small, but I actually got a master of the whole thing that I stacked, so I can use the moon as a frame of reference. Now what I did is I took that master reference, overlaid it, and then just showed, and then overlaid my small reference frame for each of them on top of that, so that I knew exactly where Saturn was at each of the times of the night when I actually did that master. But of course, I only wanted to actually go and do my registacks and wavelets on the small images to save all of my processing power. So here I go through and you'll see that, each of the Saturns that I added back in as individual layers. And this is so that I can tweak the color and the luminosity of each of them individually. I wanted all of the colors to look the same because Saturn is the same color all the time, even if to me, when I'm looking at it at different points, maybe there was a bit of cloud, or maybe it was lower in the horizon, so it was more orange cast versus higher up. I wanted them all to look the same in this. So by keeping them as individual layers, I can go and adjust the color cast of each of them slightly. But there we have it. We have our 1 Saturn before the occultation and our 3 Saturns after. And that's my final image. Now, I hope that this video has been helpful and informative to you, that it's allowed you to understand how to find out about these cool events, where to go for these cool events, what it's like trying to capture them, and now finally editing them and bringing all of that back together. If this video has been helpful, let me know with a comment. If there is something else you would like me to go into in a future video, also let me know in a comment. If you didn't like it, make sure you downvote this video. That also helps me know that you guys aren't interested in this or there's something wrong with it. I would also love to know why you downvoted it, but maybe that's a bit asking too much. Finally, what does the image look like? Well, here it is. Let's have a look at that final image and zoom in to see what detail did I manage to get, because I'm actually really proud of this. At the time when I was out there taking the photos and videos, I thought I did a dreadful job. It was so cold, I made so many mistakes, but at the end of the day, I'm actually really happy with how this came out, and really proud of it. So hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully you can get out there and take some cool videos or images of occultations soon. My name is Rowan. This has been Astro with Roro. Clear skies.